you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today it's going to be the update to the Nature's Bounty build. This is the Warden tank for the Harrowstorm DLC. Now, as far as tanks go, this is a full tank. You have your taunts, you have your CCs, you have all that good stuff. But it's got a little bit of a bonus to it just for doing your job. And we'll get more into that when we get to the gear and the demonstration towards the end. But we'll start, of course, as the rest of the videos do, with the stats. We'll just make sure everything is running. We are sitting on 9.7k max magicka, 47k max health, and 24.5k max stamina. We're on 1.8k mag recovery, and of course we are on 31k resistances across the board. If you have a minor resistance buff, that will roughly push you to around cap. We are 64 points into health because we've got loads of stamina anyway, so we don't need it anywhere else, and we're taking advantage of a lot of health-based skills. And of course we're a stage 4 vampire with the Achinarch Mundus Stone. The food we're using, by the way, is max health, max stamina stuff. Flat food. Very simply put, it's this stuff right here. This is very cheap to make, very easy to get hold of. Make a stack of those and you're good to go. Now you can use this stuff if you want, but you will lose stamina, so you'll have a substantial amount less and you'll have to heavy attack quite a bit more to be able to get that back. So the choice is yours, but the flat stuff is just fine. Now, of course, I'm going to go into the skills in detail. I'm going to explain where they come from, what the morphs are, why we've chosen them, and all that good stuff, and how they are applied, of course. But if you do skip this part, of course, it's at your own risk. If you start asking questions in the comment section below that I've already answered in the video, I won't be repeating myself. So those comments will be ignored, unfortunately. But the information is here, so if you don't skip it, you're going to have everything you need. Now, first of all, we are using Bull Netch. Now, I know sometimes I use the Betty Netch, sometimes I use the Bull Netch. This time we're using the Bull Netch on purpose because we've covered our Magicka Sustain elsewhere. But don't worry. This is an Animal Companion skill line. 4th ability to unlock starts off as Betty Netch, morph it to Bull Netch. You can choose the blue one if you want. It will give you Magicka back instead of stamina. But we've deliberately chosen this one so we can get back resources while we are still blocking. Now, this is very simple. You activate it, and it gives you stamina recovery, up to 4,992 stamina back, in fact, over 25 seconds. And it also gives you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 20%. And every 5 seconds, this will remove one negative effect from you by default. It just runs, and every 5 seconds, you take one debuff off of you, or negative effect, or dot, or something. This is a very powerful skill, not just for your recovery, but of course for your survival, because you get all that nasty stuff off of you, if it can be cleansed. Next is Polar Wind. This is our main heal. This is different to how it used to be on this particular build for reasons, but we'll get to that in the gear later. It is in the Winter's Embrace skill line, starts off as Arctic Wind, morph it to Polar Wind. Now this is very simple. It will heal you, and then you'll get an additional heal every 1 second for 5 seconds on top of it once it's finished, or once the first one is hit even. And it will also heal one other ally up to 12 meters away from you for the equivalent of what you just healed. This can crit yourself or them as well. And while this persists, you will do damage in area of effect every 1 second for 5 seconds also. So this can actually do ice damage, which of course can apply a status effect, which can minor maim the target. So any ice damage you do, remember that that is a contributing factor, and you could actually apply a debuff to them as well as dealing damage. Although the damage isn't that high, the chance for the debuff is higher. And this scales off of your maximum health. As you can see clearly here, the higher your health, the stronger this is. So if you have really, really high health, the heal's huge. If you have really low health, not so much. So that's your personal and one other person heal as and when you need to. Now, Pierce Armor, of course, is in the Sword and Board skill line, One Hand and Shield. First ability to unlock starts off as Puncture, morph it to Pierce Armor. Not only will this debuff the target, giving them basically Major Fracture and Major Breach, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 5280 for 15 seconds, this will also Taunt for 15 seconds. This is how you keep the attention of the boss, or ads, or whatever it is you're trying to keep the attention of. If you don't want the targets to hit the other people in the group, you need to apply a taunt and keep it up. Do not let this run out. This is how you gain and control aggro. Next up is Shimmering Shield. This is in the Winter's Embrace skill line. 4th ability to unlock starts off as Crystallized Shield, morph it to Shimmering Shield. This is also scaled off of your max health, so the more health you have, the stronger this is. As you can see here, 70k shield. If we increase our health a little bit, that's a buff we're getting to later. 75k shield, which is stupid. Any projectiles that you take damage from will be shielded for the equivalent of 75k damage, and this can happen 3 times. So once it's gone or it runs out, you have to do it again. Each projectile you absorb, however, will give you 806 magicka back, and you'll get major heroism, giving you a massive ulti regen. So you want to keep this up in fights where there's lots of range damage coming in, because you can generate ultimate really, really fast, and you're almost impossible to kill. Now, next up is Bone Shield. In fact, Bone Surge is the Undaunted skill line. Starts off as Bone Shield, morph it to Bone Surge. This is very simply put another one that scales off of your max health and gives you a damage shield for all damage taken. Not projectiles like the other skill, all of it. And yes, of course, they stack. Now, this lasts 6 seconds, just like the last one. It costs stamina instead of magicka, so be careful with your resources. And if someone takes a synergy off it, 5 other people will have a damage shield given to them equivalent of 30% of their maximum health, and they will gain major vitality, which means the heals they receive are stronger. Make sure your group takes the synergy as and when they can, if the mechanics permit them to do so. It's very strong indeed. Now, the ultimate is, of course, Permafrost. This is in our Winter's Embrace skill line. Starts off at level 12, so you can get Sleet Storm and morph it to Permafrost. Now, this is quite expensive in terms of ultimate cost. It's 194, but we do have really high regen for ultimate if we use Shimmer and Shield at the right time, so make sure you pay attention to that. This does a damage over time effect for 12 seconds in area of effect, 10-meter radius in fact, so it's pretty big, and it will do ice damage throughout. Now, although we're not spec'd into max magicka, so the frost damage is not that much, this does apply the status effect of Chilled, which is minor maim. So we can actually reduce the enemy's damage output, just like we do with any other frost skill. This is done by default with this one. The movement speed of the targets is really, really slow, and you and nearby allies gain major protection, reducing all damage that you take by 30%. So this reduces the target's damage output and reduces your and your group members' damage intake. So it's a really strong protection buff. You want to keep this up if you can, as and when you can utilize it, depending on what other ultimates you tend to use in your group situations. Now, Expansive Frost Cloak, of course we're going to use this. This is in the Winter's Embrace skill line. Starts off as Frost Cloak, morph it to Expansive Frost Cloak. This is really important. It's Major Resolve. It increases your physical and spell resistance by 5280 for 20 seconds, but it also does the same to everybody else. So no one in your group needs to bring a resistance buff if you can keep this up. Simple as that. Now, if someone else in your group has this, and they're giving it to the group, and they can keep it up all the time anyway, then of course you can take this off and replace it with something else, something more utility-based if you prefer. But if you can keep this particular buff up, your whole group are going to thank you for it, because they now have an extra slot each, and they don't need to bring their own Major Resolve. This is the only buff in the game, apart from one set actually, that applies this buff to your group. So the Warden is very unique with this particular skill, because most people only have it for themselves. Now, Blockade of Frost is not 100% essential. You could use other Destro abilities on this bar, but I do tend to utilize this because of a very good reason. Actually, 2 very good reasons, which we're now about to get to. First of all, starts off as Wall of Elements, morph it to Elemental Blockade. Second ability you unlock in a Destro Staff skill line. Now, if you have an Ice Staff, of course, this turns it to Blockade of Frost. It does ice damage every 1 second and slows down the movement speed of the enemies, which can, of course, apply chilled status effects. So, their damage can be reduced. And chilled enemies, if they are chilled, so if they have the frozen status effect on them, they will be actually frozen and immobilized on the spot for 4 seconds. So this counts as a CC as well. Not only does it slow them down for a bit of crowd control, it can actually pin them on the spot. And of course, with it being chilled, they don't hit as hard. So this is a very good ability to keep up if you can. The reason we've chosen Blockade, by the way, is because of the longer duration. The reason it is being utilized is not just for this, however, it's also for our back bar glyph, so it can fire as often as possible, but we will, of course, get to that in the gear. Keep this up if you can. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but it helps if you can, and this also contributes to our build as well. We're going to make more sense of these damage over time abilities later. Grow and Swarm, of course, is very, very important. This is a debuff of sorts. So, first of all, Animal Companion's third ability to unlock starts off as Swarm, morph it to Growing Swarm. This is attached to the target and does bleed damage over 10 seconds. And it applies minor vulnerability to the target, increasing the damage they take. If you have minor vulnerability in your group already, you don't necessarily have to use this. So that is already covered. But this does do damage over time to the target, and it does damage over time to other targets as well. So this does do a large bleed to the main target, but also splashes doing damage to every other target surrounding. Now, this does come into play with our gear, and is very important for that purpose. So if you don't want to use the skill because you don't see the need for the minor vulnerability, that is of course fine if you already have it covered, but you might want to use it anyway because of the way we're set up, because this does enhance our build by quite a lot by adding an extra dot. As you can see here, we have damage over time, we have damage over time here, we have damage over time here, and here. And all of these are just buffs and debuffs. They are just tank stuff doing what they do. That will make more sense later. Frozen Device, of course, is next. This is in a Winter's Embrace skill line. This is the last ability to unlock. Starts off as Frozen Gate, morph it to Frozen Device. This is very simple. This is basically your chains ability, but it's applied very different to a standard chain. Silver Leash, which you can choose to use if you prefer, will just tag the target and pull it in. This is kind of a marker on the ground, which if the enemy stands in it, they're pulled to you. And they are then immobilized for 3 seconds. So they get pulled to you and stuck on the spot. And if they do get stuck on the spot, you will affect them with Major Maim, which means their damage done is reduced by 30%. So if they get hit with the chill status effect, and they're pulled in by this, they'll have minor and major maim on them, giving them a massive reduction to how much damage they can actually do. So this is very helpful for pulling stuff together and stacking things up, which you will need to do with this build, and of course utilizing your damage mitigation bonuses. And you can have 3 of these up at a time, by the way. So rather than the chains where you have to fire them one after the other, after the other, after the other, you can actually put these down early wherever you think or know the enemies are going to spawn and let them run into it. So you can pre-plan your attacks if you like. Next up, of course, is Gripping Shards. This is the last ability before we get to the final ultimate, of course. Second ability in Winter's Embrace starts off as Impaling Shards, morph it to Gripping Shards. This one is scaled off of max health, by the way. So the higher your health, the more effective it is. Now, this will do damage over time for 12 seconds, and it will also immobilize enemies for 3 seconds as well. So if they have been immobilized for this, or they've been immobilized by something else and they're under CC cooldown, so they can't be immobilized or anything like that at the moment, this is ice damage, so it could do it again once it's ran out. So be aware of that. And the damage done is based off of your max health. So the higher your health, the higher chance you have to apply a chilled status effect. So, of course, the more chilled you have, the more minor maim you have, and the more chance you have, of course, of repeatedly making that happen, which would then, in turn, fire an extra immobilization from your Wall of Elements. So these do stack up against each other. One gives an immobilization flat out, the other one if they are chilled. So if they come into this, they're about to come off cooldown, they land inside of this, and they are chilled, this will pin them again. It's massive CC if you have these working up against each other. Now, next up is Enchanted Forest. This is the choice ultimate you can have, and this helps heal your group, basically. It's in the Green Balance skill line, starts off as Secluded Grove, morph it to Enchanted Forest. This is 87 ultimate, and it lasts for 6 seconds, and you can fire this at range, but it has an 8-meter radius, of course, and this will heal your group with a big heal, first of all, and then continues to heal over time for 6 seconds. But if you heal anyone, including yourself, while they are under 50% health with the initial heal, you will get 20 ultimate back. So if you heal 5 people, and they're all low health, and the first tick hits them while they're under 50%, you just got 100 ultimate back. So you can basically spam it. This is your heal for the group, and very helpful bonus to them as well, because you can apply a passive because of this. But if you don't have this, or you don't want to use this, depending on the situation, you can of course swap this out for Warhorn, or whatever you preference at the time. You can use Barrier or anything you like, but most people like to go Warhorn, but this is very helpful anyway. Now we're going to get into passives, and this will start making a bit more sense. It's still going to be a little bit vague, because we haven't got to the gear yet, but just stick with the whole you need dot stuff, and that will make more sense when we get there. So, you are going to want these. Anytime your animal companion skills end, you are healed for 1, 4, 3, 6. Now, if you recast your Bullnetch, that will count as though the pet basically died, and that's the end of the skill, even though you're overlapping it, and you will get heal from it. When you cast an animal companion's ability while you are in combat, you generate 4 ultimate. This can happen once every 8 seconds. This is free, by the way. Doesn't cost anything, so free ulti. Increases your magicka and stamina recovery by 12% if an animal companion ability is slotted. We have one on the front, we have one on the back, we are covered. So we've got it on both bars. And of course, increases your damage done by 2% for each animal companion ability slotted. We'll take it, it's there. We are going to do some damage on this build, but it's not essential. So if you don't have enough points for this, don't worry. Green balance, of course, we're not using every single one of these because we're barely using any of the skills. We're mostly just using the ultimate. But when you heal yourself or an ally while under 40% health with a green balance ability, you gain major mending, increasing your healing done by 25% for 3 seconds. So if you do apply this to somebody while they are low health, not only will you get ultimate back, if they're lower than 40% instead of 50, you will get major mending, making those heals stronger. So you are going to want that. When you heal an ally with a green balance ability, you gain 250 magicka or stamina, whichever resource pool is lower. So that'll be magicka. This can happen once every second. So again, if you do fire this off while people are being healed, you will actually get magic back every second. This increases your healing done with green balance abilities by 2% for each one slotted. You get a 2% bonus on the back bar just for being there while you use it, but on the front we won't. And when you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant them minor toughness. So if you do put this heal down and everybody takes a heal from it, you get 10% increase to your max health, and so does everybody else. So that's really helpful. Not to mention, of course, if you do use this skill here and you heal yourself or someone else, or both in fact, you will get minor toughness again. And if you choose to use stuff like Blood Funnel, which some people like to use in the Undaunted skill line, this here, the Sanguine Altar, turned from Blood Altar, or the other morph, doesn't matter which, you are applying minor lifesteal to the targets, and you are effectively applying that heal to people, so they'll benefit from this as well. So that's actually quite helpful. But that's a choice. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. Just underlining the fact that if you give a heal in any way, shape, or form, you or the other people, whoever gets it, will get a health increase, which is why we're sitting on 47k health, while ideally we look like we're on 44. Winter's Embrace is very important, of course. This is going to give you an increase to chilled status effect chances. So this increases your chance to apply status effect chances with Winter's Embrace abilities. So this here, this here, this here, any of these will apply it, and so can this as well. So we want to keep up chilled as much as possible. We want that minor maim, and we also want that immobilization inside Wall of Elements as much as we can get, and this does contribute towards that. Also, enemies and allies who have recently been chilled take 10% more critical damage and healing from you. So inside ice mechanics, if someone takes a large amount of damage and ends up with a status effect on them, you can actually help that. Now, this increases your physical and spell resistance for each ability from this skill line on your bar. So we've got 3 on the front, and we've got 3 on the back. So that's why we've got the 1,500 extra resistances on both bars. This reduces effectiveness of snares applied to you, so we don't get slowed down too much, and increases your magic and frost damage by 10%. So we do ice damage, that'll contribute towards that. It's not massively important because we're a tank, but it will contribute. So on board, of course, on the front bar, we are taking advantage of all these passives. You need all of them. This reduces the cost of your one-handed shield abilities. We are using one. Make sure you take advantage of that. It's a taunt. You don't want that to run out, and we do want to get the cost down. And reduces the cost of blocking, which is really helpful. Just note, by the way, this ultimate here, as an oh shit choice, you can, of course, choose to put this here instead. That gives you a block for 8 seconds, and all of your one-handed shield skills are free, and you can run around at full speed without actually holding the block button. And you get stamina recovery as well. So in emergencies, you might want to use that. Anyway, moving on to the passives again. Increase your weapon damage of this skill line, so that's not massively important, but the part that is the damage you take will be lessened, because the amount you take through block is 20% less. So it increases the amount of damage you can take even. Improves your standard bash attacks. You are going to want to bash and interrupt stuff, and if you do bash, you gain an additional 500 weapon and spell damage, and reduction to cost for the bash. The damage of the bash is not that important for us, but the reduction to cost is. This increases the amount of damage you can block from projectiles at range. Of course, we've got really good range mitigation anyway because of our Shimmer and Shield, but this will also contribute if we do get hit in the health. And this reduces the movement speed penalty for bracing. Now, when you block, you are slower. This reduces that. Now, we are using a destruction staff. We are using an ice staff on the back. Pay very close attention to this. If you heavy attack something with an ice staff, you will taunt it. You'll get a damage shield as well, but you will taunt it. And you'll get magic back because it's a heavy attack. And while you're holding the Desperate Staff, you now use your magic bar to block with, not your stamina. So you use stamina on the sword and board, use magic on the ice. Very simple to understand, but pay attention to your resources. You must have this passive if you want to taunt from long range with a ice staff heavy attack. Bear in mind, of course, if you don't like the ice staff heavy attack, you can, of course, use the Undaunted taunt, which is in a fire. You can morph it either way to the magical or stamina one. It's entirely up to you, but you are going to have to sacrifice a skill on this bar to be able to do so. But essentially, your passives are very, very important, and you must pay attention to them. Lots and lots of DPSs keep running around with an ice staff, heavy attacking, and wondering why they've got aggro. It's a taunt. This will ignore 10% of the target's spell resistance for your lights, your heavies, and your skills for your destruction staff. This increases your chance to apply burning, concussion, and chill status effects by 100%, only while holding the destruction staff. So while we do have passives in chilled status effects for Winter's Embrace skills, this also does heighten the chance to apply those chilled status effects on this bar only. One of them is a class passive, it's for the skills. This one is a destruction passive, it's only while holding the staff. As soon as you switch to the front and go on your sword and board, that's when you lose this passive and you don't have it anymore. So while you're on this bar, that's important. Now, also, equipment of Frost Staff reduces the cost of blocking by 36%. So while you're on this bar, you have less block cost, so it's cheaper for your Magicka. And of course, it increases the amount of damage you can block. Very much like the sword and board passives, you have a higher mitigation on both bars. If you have a different element staff, you do not get this block bonus, and you are susceptible to very heavy attacks, so be careful. When you kill an enemy with a destruction staff ability, you restore 3600 Magicka. If you heavy attack something and it dies, or it dies in your wall of elements and it's you that got the kill, you get resources back. We're not using any light armor, we're not using any medium, so ignore those. We are using 7 heavy. This will increase your physical and spell resistance. This will increase your health recovery and how much you restore when you get hit every 4 seconds. For each piece worn, so we actually get 757 magic and stamina back, which is handy, just for being hit. This increases your maximum health by 2% for each piece worn. Now this passive is a little busted at the moment. This is on the PTS. It's during the off-cycle test, if you like, for lights and heavy attacks. This also isn't coming through in the next update, so this is irrelevant for now. What this passive actually does is, if you do a heavy attack, you get 25% of your resources back. So this adds to your resource gain while heavy attacking. And this increases your healing received by 8%. So that's also very important. We are a stage 4 vampire, of course. You do want this, which will increase your mag and stam recovery by 10%. At the beginning, I showed you the stats were 1.8. They're actually 1.9 for mag recovery, because I didn't have these passives in at the time. And of course, you want undeaf. This reduces the amount of damage you take by up to 33%, based on your missing health. So if you're under 50% health, the lower and lower and lower you go, the less damage you actually take. And we have a big, big pool of health, so we can actually go quite low safely, and then take advantage of course, our bigger heal, which is scaled off of our health. You don't have to be a vampire if you don't want to be, but I tend to choose to do that on purpose. It's really, really fun, and especially if you're using mist form, because you can actually mitigate up to 75% of damage while you're in that phase, as long as it's not a major boss heavy attack, because it still will knock you over. But that's not necessarily part of the build. You can just choose to use that if you want to. Fighters Guild is important for one particular passive. You are going to want this. If you kill undead, Daedra, or werewolves, you will get 9 ultimate back. You will get kills with this build. That will give your ultimate back. You can use your permafrost or your heals more often, or whatever ultimate you choose to take. Undaunted is important, of course. If you take any synergy, you will get resources back. Make sure you take the synergies, because health, magic, and stamina is returned. That helps with your abilities to sustain, and of course keeps your survival up. This is very important, but we are only taking advantage of one type of armor today on this particular build. 7 heavy, so we get 2% for wearing 7 heavy. That's it. Now, we are, of course, an Imperial. You can choose any race you like. You might just have to wiggle some skills a little bit and some of the build. But we are taking advantage of this for very good reasons. This increases your max health by 2k, which is huge. We want the big health pool because we have health-based skills. This increases your max stamina, which, of course, is also important because we want to have enough resources to be able to block. And, of course, this reduces the cost of all your abilities, including your ultimates. And when you deal direct damage, which we will do a lot of the time, you will restore 379 health and 3-3 magicka and stamina, which can happen once every 5 seconds. This is not quite as high as the Argonian potion passive, where it gives you a big burst of resources back instantly. This actually does it over time if you're in a long durated fight and you are doing direct damage. And eventually you'll roughly end up with about 3k of each resource back over a 45-second period. So it's not far off. It is stretched though, but the reduction to cost is really helpful alongside this. So you've got resource gain, you've got reduction to cost, and you've got flat stats. Again, you can choose any race you like. Alchemy, of course, is very important. We are going to be using tripods, which is health back, stamina back, and magicka back, plus recovery for all 3 resources. And we have a 45-second uptime on them. In fact, 47. The cooldown is 45. Uptime is 47. If you have not unlocked this passive and you're not utilizing it, your potions will last for 36 seconds-ish, and you obviously lose 10 seconds worth of effectiveness. They're consumable buffs. Keep them up. Now we're going to get into the gear. This is going to be a little different for some of you. So, I said already, we are a tank. We have a taunt. We have damage shields. We have recovery. We have a heal. We have protection skills. But a healing skill. You can even have Warhorn if you really want to. You've got your CC abilities. You've got your resistance buff. You've got your chain abilities. You have a range taunt in a heavy attack or undaunted skill if you want. And of course, we've got a minor vulnerability debuff as well. Now, this is pretty standard. Every tank can effectively work as a tank using this. And sure, you'll have some damage over time. But this damage over time contributes massively to our setup. So, how does that work? Well, we have Azure Blight on the weapons. One hand and shield on the front, Ice Staff on the back. Ice Staff is infused with a Magicka damage ability, or glyph even, which will return magic. So while our Wall of Elements is down, every time this is off cooldown, which is very, very fast, it will constantly fire this and give us magic back. On the front bar, we are taking advantage of a Drain Magic Poison, which means if you use a weapon ability, light attack, heavy attack, or your taunt, you can fire this poison and it will constantly give you magicka back. That covers our recovery, which we want to be quite high on our back bar weapon and or our magicka resources, whichever way you want to look at it. But because this is a constant proc due to your damage ability, and because this is constant and it is applied off of your light or heavies or abilities, this doesn't follow the same rules as recovery. So you can apply both of these at the same time and still hold block on your Ice Staff bar and still recover. Very handy indeed. Make sure you take advantage of these. You can, of course, use other glyphs if you prefer to, but because we're going to be taking advantage of as much AoE situations as possible, if this was a Crusher, it would jump backwards and forwards around multiple different enemies. Whereas because we're using this for recovery, it doesn't matter which target it actually hits, as long as we get the juice back so then we can use other skills. Same applies to this. If you want to change that, you can do. And especially for single target, you might want to do that anyway. But this is set up this way on purpose. What you do with it is up to you. This set, however, what it does, defending on the weapons, by the way, apart from the back one, don't stay on there too long. What this does is gives you a weapon crit, which will only really apply to your swarm, your bees. Stamina, which will be helpful for our blocking. Stam recovery, which is helpful when we're not blocking or when we're on the Ice Staff bar. And when you deal damage over time, you will contribute towards a stack, which lasts for 5 seconds. Every time you add a new stack, the 5 seconds starts again. And this will max out to 20 stacks. Every 1 tick of damage that you do will contribute to this. When it gets to 20, it will go boom. This doesn't only apply to one target. This can apply to as many targets as you can reach or apply damage to. Now, the only thing that does apply to them is each target has a 2-second cooldown once this has gone boom. But this effect stacks to every single target they actually meet. Now, how does that affect us? We are a tank. We are applying CC, damage over time, and debuffs that all work together for our purpose of our role. And for doing so, for free, stuff blows up. Every single enemy that explodes hits other enemies in area of effect. So if you have one enemy on its own, just one boom. 5 enemies together, each one blows up and hits each other. You can see how this is going to escalate dramatically and get stupid. And also, if someone else is using this set as well, instead of them having 20 stacks and you having 20 stacks and you get 2 explosions, you and them both contribute to the same stacks as long as you're both doing damage over time, which makes the explosion faster. The cooldown stays, it's always 2 seconds per target, but the explosions can go off quicker. So if you use this alongside the cleave build on my channel, for example, these go off almost every 3 seconds. It's stupid. And all you have to do is your tanking stuff. And to add to the damage over time that we're already doing, we have this, Frozen Watcher, which is a heavy set, stamina, health, and stamina, so more to block with, more health. And while you're blocking, you do frost damage in area of effect. And the Blizzard has a 15% chance to apply chilled status effects to damaged enemies. This is very simple. You just block, and alongside all the rest of the ice that you have another way to chill the targets for more damage mitigation or damage reduction to the targets, meaning that you get hit less, basically. Now, this also is damage over time and contributes towards the stacks of this. So, faster explosions. All we're doing is tanking. We're holding block and keeping our buffs and debuffs up. Tick, tick, boom. Very simple. Now, as far as monster sets are concerned, there are lots and lots of choices. Iceheart was altered somewhat, but still works very, very well. However, if the damage shield falls off, the damage over time falls off. So there's a negative part to that now. Grofdar will fire and do damage just for you doing any damage whatsoever, and help do damage over time and make more explosions go off. But instead of having another damage over time addition to what we have, and there are multiple choices for that, we decided to do something a little different. You will notice that this doesn't stun. The other morph of it does after 3 ticks. Why did we choose not to actively use this as a stun? Well, because we've got loads of mobilization anyway, so we're pretty much CC in the room. And because we don't want to spam this, we just want to use it when we can, we've actually taken advantage of this. We are using Celestrix. This will give you a stamina bonus, so that helps towards being able to block more and use our stamina skills. And when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance. Any damage, by the way. That includes Frozen Watcher, if a Zerb Light fires off, if any of our dots that we're using for CC or debuffs do any damage, any of them can make this fire. And when that happens, you have an earthquake that erupts underneath the enemies, within area of effect, and it will do physical damage to them and stun them for 3 seconds. And this can happen once every 5.5 seconds. So all you have to do is keep your CC up, make sure you're still aggro on the targets, and block. And you will have a free area of effect stun every 5.5 seconds. This is absolutely nuts for your control. We've got ice all over the place, and we've got constant earthquakes coming out of the ground to stun targets. Pay attention to what you're doing, of course, because you don't want to stun stuff miles away. So if you are going to heavy attack something to taunt it in, or you're going to chain it to taunt it in with your frozen device, just make sure you don't deliberately put a dot on them at range. You want that stuff for close range. Once they're in, then pin them all up and get the damage on. This is absolutely nuts, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a moment as well. Now, as far as the sets are concerned, where you should put them, you want Sword and Board on the front, Eye Staff on the back, and you want 3 Jewelry of a Zerblight. You want to change these stats here from Robust, as far as the trait is concerned, to Healthy if you can, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have Transmute Crystals. You can keep them for Robust for the time being, or you might want to stay that way anyway. It's up to you. But Magic Recovery on all of them. You want, on the body, you want Sturdy, 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 and 3 Reinforce for the heads, shoulders, and chest. That will pretty much cover everything you need for your block mitigation and your resistances. You want Nirnhorn Shield, by the way, with a defending one-hander. It doesn't matter whether it's an axe, dagger, or sword, or mace. Any one-hander is fine. Back bar, of course, is infused. Now we're going to get into champion points, then I'm going to give you a demonstration. So, 72 into Ironclad, 8 into Spell Shield. Spell Shield is filling the gap that we have because we're not an Ord, we're not a Dragon Knight, we're missing some spell resistance, so we plug the gap there. The 72 here to reduce the amount of damage you take from direct attacks. 56 and 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, giving us a 12% reduction to damage across the board for everything we take apart from Oblivion, and this, of course, will reduce the amount of damage over time we take. 19 points in a Quick Recovery to give us a Healing Received bonus, so any heals that we get from other people or ourselves are heightened, and of course 11 points into Heavy Armor Focus, again to plug the physical gap, just like the spell resistance gap here. They're not exactly the same, but they're not far off. This, by the way, the 11 here rather than 8 was to give it a little bit more of a buffer, and of course to take advantage of the infusion passive, because you may be resin people, especially if you're using the block ulti. 44 into Warlord to reduce the cost of break free. 75 in Tenacity, ignore what this says, this is not coming through to live at the moment. We did get a notice from Zos the other day saying that there was a test and it's not going through yet, or maybe never will, but this actually gives you returned resources if you do a heavy attack. You get that anyway, but this will give you a bigger bonus. So for 75 points in here, you'll get 14% of your heavy attack return on top of it. This will give you more magical recovery, so we're taking advantage of that. 4 into Tumbling, it's not that much. We won't even get a real benefit out of this, so you don't have to put this here if you don't want to, but it's better than putting it nowhere. And of course, 72 into Shadow Ward to reduce the block cost, because we have a few sturdy already. We don't have block cost reduction jewelry on purpose. We want to get as much as we can out of here without going too heavy into diminished returns across the board. Now, 51 into Elfborn, so we have heightened critical heals and damage if we do crit damage. 75 into Bless to increase our heals flat out. Now, we are doing some direct damage, so we do take advantage of this because we've got nowhere to really put our points. And we put our points into here, actually, because this will contribute to damage over time, which we are doing some of, and this will contribute to physical disease and poison, which a Zerblight is disease. Now, although it may feel not worth putting the points in here because damage that tanks do is generally a bit poop, we do actually do a considerable amount passively, and above all, we want this passive. So this will give you major heroism, so if you're not using the Shimmer and Shield right now, you can still get this bonus anyway if you go low health. It's an emergency free buff. Now, demonstration-wise, how does this all work? So, all we need to do is keep up our CC on the ground, so our immobilization, ice stuff, wall of elements, all that good stuff. Make sure we maintain the taunt and keep our buffs on. That's pretty much it. So, all I'm going to do is keep up my resistance buff. I'm going to keep down these CC abilities, because that's what we do. I'm going to keep up my Era of Effect ice damage and my heal, because that's also what we do. Now, you can keep up your Netch and your damage shields, and your ultimates and all that good stuff as well if you need to, but essentially, we are keeping up protection, heals, and control. So let's put down some control. All I'm doing is what tanks do. And look at my resources. They're fine. Boom! Every 5 seconds, everything's being stunned. In the meantime, all the damage over time that's going off is contributing to a Zerblight, which makes everybody explode. And if you have a cleave build with you at the time, or somebody else using a Zerblight, it's even quicker. This damage over time just requires you to block. Easy. And that's it. You taunt stuff. You bring stuff in when you have to. Hold block, and keep their attention. This stuff has to stay on the ground. Debuffs have to stay up. If you do feel like you're low on resources, you've got a heavy attack for your stamina return on one bar. You've got a heavy attack for your mag return on the other. And that, of course, is a taunt as well. Very, very simple. So, hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. Remember, you just have to do tank stuff, and all those explosions will go off for you. The trick is, however, make sure stuff stays close. You're the one in control. Stack things up. And that will help your group as well, of course, because Era of Effect can then be applied a lot easier for them as well as you. So, first of all, thank you all very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support. If you are not subscribing on YouTube already, please do hit those buttons. They are free. Don't forget, of course, there is a notification bell where you can actually hit that and see when I'm uploading new videos. Also, of course, if you want to help support outside the channel, there are some links in the info section below where I will have links for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com where all the written guides are, including this one. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.